So in Module 8, now we're going to turn our cognitive focus to social and social relationships. And so something to think about in this module is to really think about how teens' perspective-taking skills really change from when they were children. Because I think you could argue very easily that friendships and other social relationships in childhood look very different than those type of friendships and relationships in adolescence and then again in adulthood. Some of that's going to be a reflection of formal operational thought that we've discussed earlier in this chapter and just the ability to see multiple perspectives. So let's go ahead and walk through this thing that we call social cognition. Okay, so it describes the way we think about other people, our social relationships, and our social institutions. So we use our social cognition all of the time. The more we interact with people, the more social cognition that we are using. And there are two aspects to social cognition. One of those being perspective taking. So the ability to understand the thoughts and feelings of others. And then we also have the idea of adolescent egocentrism, and that is having difficulty distinguishing your own thinking about yourself from the thoughts of others. So in this module, we're going to focus pretty exclusively on social cognition. And then in module 9, we're going to look at adolescent egocentrism. And I always like adolescent egocentrism. It's very, very interesting. Not that perspective taking isn't, but well, you'll see. So Selman is the one that came up with the study of this kind of perspective taking in childhood over time. And that perspective taking is the ability to understand thoughts and feelings of others. And in this case, the theory of perspective taking is really based on kind of a stage approach. So by that, we're talking like Piaget has a stage approach. This is also a stage approach on the different kind of steps that each child and adolescent go to get to the next level. And what they find is that egocentrism that is seen in childhood gradually is going to develop into a more mature kind of perspective-taking ability in adolescence. So what we see is from around 6 to 8 years of age, children really just begin to develop perspective-taking skills, but they really have a difficult time comparing their own perspective with somebody else's. And so that led Piaget to really talk about at 6 to 8 year olds kind of an egocentric perspective. In other words, everything's done from your own perspective, and it's very hard to appreciate what others are. So when a 7-year-old comes up and tells you something and you're offended by it, 'cause they haven't thought about how that affects you at all. That's just all from their perspective. Now, from 8 to 10, you now see that children are being able to understand that others may have a point of view different from your own. So they kind of knew that. And now they're able to take another's perspective, at least they're able to understand that that can really help in your understanding of others' intentions and actions, but they're still not great at it. Then where we pick things up is early adolescence, and that's in that 10 to 12 range. Children now are capable of something called mutual perspective taking. And this is where you understand that another person has a perspective that is going to be different from your own. And then you're also realizing that other persons understand that you have a perspective different from theirs. So it's not like you have this secret insight into everybody else and they don't have the same kind of capability. Boy, that would be like a superpower if you did. But of course, you realize quickly, no, that's not the case, that they have their own perspectives about how they perceive you and what you're thinking. And where disagreements happen is that misinterpretation of what what each person is thinking. And we try to get around, sometimes you can just bluntly ask and dispel if you have any incorrect views. But a lot of times you don't, and you make assumptions, and then problems can occur when those assumptions are wrong. So next, after the 10 to 12, we get into more late adolescence. And late adolescents become capable of what we call social and conventional perspective taking. And what this looks like is that they come to realize that their social perspectives and those are others are influenced not just by interactions with each other, but also the roles that you play in a larger society. So, for instance, if you are somebody who's assisting other people and you don't call the shots yourself, that is going to influence the way that you interact and anticipate interacting with your boss because there's a larger role here beyond just your all's immediate interactions. And we see this all the time now, with the things like the Me Too movement and Black Lives Matter and all these other types of movements that have increased awareness of these kind of societal roles that everybody has been assigned and how that really influences the way that people interact with one another. And by late adolescence, you're really beginning to appreciate that. And of course, try to change things when it seems like unfair, but you still have that as a kind of inherent part of that perspective taking. So you see this real advancement and movement in perspective taking over time. Now, why are we focusing on this? Well, it plays such an important role in adolescent peer relationships. You want somebody that's going to get you, but you also need to develop the skills to anticipate what others are going to want or what they might do to be able to kind of grease the wheels of social interaction. And it's really going to predict also the higher level of perspective taking and more advanced is more sympathy and pro-social behavior. Because if you can put yourself into somebody else's shoes, then when they seem to be hurting, you can relate to that and then say, even though I'm fine, I can see the hurt of another individual, therefore I want to help them out. And you can see how that easily plays into the role of kind of sympathy or empathy and those type of reactions. So in Module 9, we're going to pick up and talk about adolescent egocentrism, so that other part of social cognition that we referred to earlier in this module, and also the influence of culture and other cognitive kind of culture in the way of cognitive issues, which we touched on a little bit with Piaget, get into more here in Module 9. So stay tuned.